We tell our clients whenever you're starting a job search, you better pack your patience and a sense of humor because you're definitely going to need it.
If your company is trying to call themselves your family, that's a huge red flag because a company is not a family. It's definitely not.
They want to present the image to their higher-ups that the company is experiencing growth. I seem to recall that there was an energy company around 2001 that tried that, and I can't remember how that story ended, but
it didn't work out so well.
Oh, it didn't work out? Oh, okay.
The biggest complaint that I hear is they want all this experience, but it's an entry-level position. So I tried to show them my college experience. I have an internship. I did this, I did this.
Experience for an entry-level position that will probably pay you just $55,000.
Seeing some of these job descriptions, I envision less someone sitting there writing a list and more someone throwing darts at a dartboard. And it's like, okay, that's what we'll add next. I imagine that NBC programs the fall schedule in the same way, but
if someone could yell at you over lunch and then, also call you at 10 o'clock at night and ask you for a project status for an update.
So in the case of yelling, it would be, when we say family, that would connote in-laws rather than immediate family. Sorry.
We're Italian. We yell about everything and then 2 minutes later it's all forgotten and, we move on. So
you said it, I didn't. Coming up, you've heard about hiring from the folks that do it, but wait, there's more. Stay tuned for the rest of the story when Higher Learning continues on B Squared. That's today, and it all starts right now. So I've said it before, and I'll probably say it again. Nobody likes job hunting. Let me say it again. Nobody likes job hunting. Especially right now, because as you may have noticed, the economy has a turning radius that most automakers would envy, just saying. Not that long ago, I learned that a connection of mine on LinkedIn, despite having a plethora of experience that frankly I find enviable, was having difficulty finding a full-time role, and of course, being me, I did the only thing I know how to do. I invited her on and then gathered up a group of experts to try and help her out. Kristina, thanks for joining us tonight. I have a feeling that we're going to get some good help for you this evening. So tell us a little bit about your background and what you're looking for.
So I am a creative marketing professional. I have over 15 years of experience on both the agency side and the brand/client side. And I left a toxic workplace culture in January. My mental health was suffering. I knew I needed to get out of the job, and I stayed as long as I possibly could. I decided to take a break before jumping back into job searching, and when I did, it wasn't as easy as I remembered it to be.
And I've said it before, but of the 35 million quits that happened in 2021, and January of 2022 is close enough that we'll count it, but of the 35 million quits that were estimated by the Bureau of Labor Statistics to have happened in 2021, almost 7 million of those were attributable to toxic work environments. So Kristina, you are very much not alone. A lot of people have learned to walk away, and I for one, applaud you for putting your mental health and your personal health ahead of all else. So hopefully we'll be able to help you out tonight. So joining us to help Kristina out, we have a panel of experts, if ever there was such a group. We have an executive resume writer, we have a high-placed executive, we have a communication professional with years of experience. So folks, if I try to introduce you, I'm not going to do as good a job as you would. So why don't you introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about what you do. I nominate Robin to go first.
I'm great. Hi, I'm Robin Story. I own Storyline Resumes. We are a US-based executive resume writing firm. We've been in business for 23 years. We have a team of 60 professionals on our staff, resume writers, executive interviewers, career coaches, and a whole bunch of really great office staff that help our customers to tell their professional stories in a way that resonates with hiring managers, recruiters, and headhunters. We work with a unique group of people. We only work with folks with 10 or more years of experience in what we would consider to be executive level roles. So thank you for having me.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for joining us. Janice, how about you?
Thank you, Brandon. Thank you for having me here. My name is Janice Coutinho. I'm a director in project management. I'd like to think of myself as a very seasoned leader in the healthcare space. I've been working in clinical trials project management for the last 15 years, managing teams and pharma clients across the Asia-Pac region and now in the US. I'm glad to be here and talking to the panel of experts today to provide my opinions on this subject.
We are very glad to have you. Thank you very much for joining us. David, how about you?
So I'm Dave LePan. I have a communication consulting business now. I'm a retired Marine, and I've been in the communication field both on the government side and in the private sector for several decades. I won't reveal how many, because that'll give away my age. But suffice to say, I've got decades of experience working in communication, and again, have been in the position of being a hiring manager, both on the government side and in the private sector. So I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yes, sir. And David, we are very glad to have you, and we're very glad to have all three of you here with us tonight. Kristina, I've said it before, but if ever there was a group that was able to help someone in your situation, it is these three. So I am expecting great things tonight. No pressure. So one thing that I think we can all relate to is the fact that, as Kristina said, job hunting ain't easy. And if you've seen our previous episode, then you'll recall that in 2014, I spent 227 days straight job seeking. For those keeping score at home, that's about 7.5 months. And during that time, I filed over 1,100 job applications. And if you remember our statistics from the previous episode, 98% of the time, I was either outright ghosted by prospective employers or was the beneficiary of an automated rejection email as the only update. So job seeking, especially over a protracted time period, can be depressing, it can be demoralizing, and let's just say it can be not a whole lot of fun. So I'm certainly empathetic to anyone who's out there that is job hunting, that has been job hunting, that's not quite anticipating job hunting, but maybe job hunting in the future. So hopefully tonight, as our experts are giving their advice and opinions to Kristina, hopefully anyone who's out there that is themselves job hunting will hear something that you can use in your daily search. And I highly encourage everyone out there to connect with Robin, with Janice, with Dave, and with Kristina as well, because these are all great people and they all have great expertise, so they are good people to know. So with that said,
we tell our clients whenever you're starting a job search, you better pack your patience and a sense of humor because you're definitely going to need it.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And if there are truer words have never been spoken. So
I think it's a full-time job in itself, and it's a grueling process.
it is. And it's unfortunate that it is that way, but partially as a consequence to the circumstances that have been in effect for the last couple of years, that's the reality that we have today. So why don't we get started? Kristina, why don't you tell us a little bit about the mechanics of your job search, and we can talk from there about maybe some market conditions that may have contributed to your challenges a little bit. So Kristina, take it away.
So first of all, I did move in June, so I knew I was looking for something in the Montclair, greater New York City area if it was going to be an in-person job. Obviously, I would prefer remote. I'm still raising a daughter at home, and I've worked remotely for the past 2 years, so it's what I'm used to. I haven't had any problem with it, so I would love a remote situation. Even a hybrid situation would be okay for me. So I did pause my job search for a little while, and when I first left my last workplace, I decided to take a break for a little bit. And then I started sending out resumes. At first, I was just kind of doing a blind canvas. I received job alerts on Indeed, and LinkedIn was a huge part of my job search. Eventually, I got to the point where I realized that just sending resumes and cover letters wasn't going to work for me, despite it having worked for me previously. So I started making connections on LinkedIn, started reaching out to people, joined some Facebook groups that have professionals in my field in them, and decided to really lean into my side hustle. So I've been a freelance copywriter and content writer since 2015. I've always done that on the side. It was just kind of my extra money. And also adjunct professor since 2011. So I do have, teaching experience, and I have been teaching since leaving my position. So I wanted to make sure that I didn't end up in another toxic workplace. So I've been very, very careful and very cautious, I would say. I have often gone for contract to hire positions because I felt, a little gun shy after that experience, and not really trusting my judgment, not trusting that I would see the red flags if they showed themselves. So, I've been very cautious. I have, my follow-up is very good, I believe, but I just haven't gotten a response. I have a lot of experience. I've been asked to do free assignments. I've been asked to, come up with a marketing campaign for a fictional widget. Things that I would ask my marketing students to do in class. So to me, sometimes I can take it, I took it a little personally.
And what you describe, the request for essentially free work as part of the job seeking process, that's something that I've heard a lot of people complain about, that if I give you my best ideas for free, then you have the idea and you have no need for me. And it's sad, but I don't want to steal anybody else's thunder, but I've seen a number of troubling hiring practices just over the last year. About the worst thing I've read about to date is that companies will post fake job ads. In other words, ads for jobs that don't exist. The reason being, they want to present the image to their higher-ups that the company is experiencing growth. I seem to recall that there was an energy company around 2001 that tried that, and I can't remember how that story ended, but
it didn't work out so well.
Oh, it didn't work out? Oh, okay. So you're saying that deceptive practices are not a good idea? Okay, good to know.
It became the poster child.
All right. Well, good to know.
Professional business behavior.
All right.
Sometimes it so happens that when the position is posted, the headcount is approved, but you could have a delay in when you can close that position based off of your budgets for the quarter, etc. So yes, the position can stay open for a very, very long time until you get a green light to go ahead and actually close it out with a candidate.
Not 20 minutes before I got on the podcast here, I received an email from a recent client of ours that participated in an 11-step process for an executive position and was asked to present an extensive business plan that took him 1 week, and he has since been ghosted. And he said, "What should I do?" And I said, "Send them a bill for your time and effort. You won't get any money from them, but it'll make you feel a hell of a lot better." So we sort of had a chuckle over it. But while that situation is extraordinarily common, I find it difficult to understand how companies can justify, 3 or 4 month process, 10 or 12 people in the pipeline, everybody doing presentations, turning that work in, and then not compensating them. And then all of a sudden, position is on hold, or we're not hiring for that. And so often, I'm sort of the repository on LinkedIn for bad job search behavior, right? People follow me. I post a lot of stories that, I've heard from our clients, and then people sort of jump in with their own. And, on one hand, can it be funny? Should you send them a bill? Absolutely. But on the other hand, it's heartbreaking, right? People are spending their valuable time. They're really getting their hopes up about opportunities for, new positions. And then, the company, just decides to not hire. They don't call you, or they don't, let you know that you didn't get the job, or maybe they steal an idea. I've heard that as well. I mean, so ultimately, you hate to sort of make suggestions around, more laws or rules or regulations or whatever the case may be. But it's almost like there's no parameters in place. There's no barrier to or boundaries for how far some organizations will go, to get what it is that they need, not really either hire somebody for that job or pay for it. That's why a job search today feels so daunting, right? It should be one of the most exciting times in your professional career, looking for new opportunities, engaging with organizations, finding out what they have to offer and opportunities to grow and expand your own knowledge and experience. And, when it all comes down to it, it ends up being a very, very disappointing and sort of demoralizing experience instead. That's the biggest problem I see in the job search, and the lack of communication. And nowhere else in our lives would you meet someone and not say hello, right? Or would you let a door slam in someone's face walking behind you, or, leave your groceries cart in the middle of the parking lot. It's all this sort of poor behavior for people that have in good faith invested a lot of time and effort in preparing, attending, and participating in an interview process. And no one has 10 seconds to call you up and say, hey, we're not going to go with you, but it was great to meet you. That's a big problem for us.
Yeah. And I'd say that the hiring market has become so ultra competitive that companies aren't held accountable for that kind of behavior, right? It's such a competition, and job seekers are put in a position that you have no recourse, right? You want that job. Right. You're going to do everything you can to even to the extent of giving your ideas and your labor for free, because you're looking for that job. And for companies and organizations, it's so competitive. They don't have to return calls. They don't have to do those things. They're not being held responsible or accountable for those things. So it is, I think what we're seeing in the job market, and it can, as Robin said, can become pretty demoralizing to candidates.
I want to reiterate something that Robin said before I forget. What makes Robin such a good person to follow on LinkedIn is precisely as she says. She shares stories that she's heard from her clients, and then others chime in. And I've seen some of those stories, and I see some of the discussion threads that happen. And the biggest takeaway that I have from seeing that, Robin, is people seem to be relieved to know that they're not alone. I think that's one of the biggest things that can make a difference when someone is job hunting. And I've heard the same thing when I did our previous episode on the Great Resignation. I was buried under an avalanche of emails from people who wanted to share their stories with me about things that they had experienced. Kristina, about toxic work environments that they had been in, about things that they had seen at their employers that they just couldn't believe. And everyone basically started their email with the same sentence. I can't believe that I'm not the only one who feels this way. So with that said, to everybody who's out there watching, follow Robin's story. I don't think, Robin, that you are able to accept many more connections, if any, but certainly follow her. Certainly follow her if you can.
Right. Yeah, we just ask that folks follow us. We're capped out at 30,000. And, LinkedIn so far hasn't given us any more connections, but I'm talking with them next week. So maybe, who knows? Maybe they'll let us connect with more people. We do love to be able to be connected with people, because even though it's not a part of what we do in our business, because we've been around such a long time and we've got, so many former customers that we're connected with, I do make a lot of introductions on LinkedIn when someone asks me to. Now, we're not recruiters. We don't place candidates or look for jobs or anything for them. We sort of begin and end with that resume package. But, if, so-and-so is applying for a job at XYZ and they see I'm connected to their VP of HR and ask me for an introduction, we're always willing to do that. And a lot of times that's how people end up getting jobs. That's called networking. So it's something that you want to. It's something that you want to do. And don't be afraid to ask for an introduction. I always tell our customers that when you're asking for an introduction or you're trying to network on LinkedIn, don't, send notes that say, hey, if you see something open, let me know. Nobody wants to do a job search for you, right? But if you send me something very specific, I see you're connected to so-and-so. Here's the requisition for the job. Here's my attached resume, or, I worked with you 6 months ago or a year ago or whatever. Would you make an introduction? And as long as that ask is going to take me less than a couple of minutes, absolutely, I'm going to do it. But it's when folks think that networking is, asking their connections to, let them know when they see something. That puts the onus on them. Nobody wants that. Everybody's busy, right? So when you ask somebody something very specific, like an introduction, or an introduction to a connection or a connection of a connection, most people are always willing to do that.
Yeah, I wanted to go back to the mechanics of job seeking. I know there's some great ideas out here, and I just wanted to point out that the market that we're operating in currently is very different from the environment that we saw last year. I think last year was a job seekers market where you could pick and choose between multiple companies, multiple offers, and you could decide where you wanted to land versus coming into 2022, it's a polar opposite environment where now employers are back to picking the candidates that they want. So just wanted to point out the stark difference in the two environments that we're operating in, which could also be potentially contributing to Kristina's situation. The tables have turned very quickly.
Yes, they have. And I've said it before, but the economy has a turning radius that automotive manufacturers would envy. Because, Janice, exactly as you described, there were how many job openings per job seeker? And now, like you said, the numbers have kind of flipped.
Okay, I mean, I don't have the stats, but this is what I'm seeing on a day-to-day basis, right? You have a lot of the people who were part of the Great Resignation last year. And in one of the news articles that I read recently, a lot of those folks are looking to come back into the workforce. So you have that talent that is parked. You have people who are part of the layoffs who are now looking for new opportunities. You need to take into account the current market that is not trending positively, which means the job positions itself are low. And for those number of openings, look at the number of candidates that are competing for those open positions. And employers can afford to be looking for that unicorn in the current market. So I think that perspective is really, really important for candidates right now when they're applying for jobs, just realizing the competition that they're up against. Don't forget, organizations are also looking at promoting their own employees from within. So you're also competing against existing employees who are looking to climb the career ladder. So the competition is absolutely, it's a thriving environment for folks who are within the organization, but very difficult for someone from the external who's looking.
Right. Statistically, unemployment is still around 4% in this country. And last reports, there were 2 open jobs for every 1 job seeker. I do think that there is a shift in the perception of what is happening in the market. And I'm certainly no conspiracy theorist, but I often wonder if some of the media attention around layoffs isn't sort of elevating the idea or the perception that it is now back to being an employer's market, because certainly employers do not like it when it's a candidate's market. Someone posted an article on LinkedIn recently that since the beginning of the year, there have been approximately 22,000 layoffs in the tech industry. There are currently 275,000 open jobs in the tech industry. So whether or not that's completely accurate, seem pretty accurate to me. I often wonder if the shifting paradigm or the shifting perception about what is really happening in hiring, what's available versus what's not available, if the narrative isn't being controlled. Because when you look at any company, if you can jump on any company website and see open positions, it's an avalanche of open positions, right? You've got folks complaining about it, can't find people to work, companies or organizations, restaurants, bars, small businesses are closing their doors because they don't have enough staff. People are open 5 days a week instead of 7 days a week. You have to wonder what is the truth and where can you find that information. But I am a little bit always hesitant to kind of believe the idea that it's no longer a candidate's market when there are so many positions that need to be filled.
I would probably also say that out of those open positions, it would be important to understand how many of those are actively open versus those positions that are just out there because you want to show a picture of growth?
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of a new thing, right? I mean, companies sort of inflating the number of open positions. Who is that benefiting? Is it benefiting, shareholders? Is it is that benefiting investors? Does that make it look like, a company is growing? I'm not really sure why an organization would post positions that they don't actually have available. It seems like a lot of time and wasted resources.
Well, and with regards to the coverage of the economy, David, see if you've ever heard this phrase in your travels. If it bleeds, it leads. And I think we're seeing a little bit of that same paradigm being implemented in coverage of the economy. You've got news organizations that are, I don't want to dive down that rabbit hole, but you've got news organizations that are desperate for clicks and views, basically to justify their own existence. So they're trying to present a controversial narrative that has a villain. And I really and truly think that at least some of what we're seeing with the coverage of the economic situation is coming about because news organizations that are desperate are seeking to demonize something and get people to invest in their coverage. That's my perspective, at least. The real story, as I said earlier, the real story, I think, well, a part of the real story, I think, comes from the Bureau of Labor Statistics themselves. I mean, they don't necessarily track everything, but they can tell you how many people are quitting, how much turnover there is, and so on and so forth. So I always start by looking at the raw data and the raw numbers, and then taking into account the coverage from there. But what do y'all think?
Brandon, so to your point, I think Exhibit A for that, how the media is portraying the marketplace is recession, right? Mm-hmm. So all the different views of, are we in a recession? Are we not in a recession? Do you look at the data? Do you not look at the data? Does it matter whether the data says we're in a recession if the public feels like we're in a recession? And how much of that is driven, again, by the media coverage that has been, pretty constant for months? We're heading to a recession. We're headed to a recession. And then you have the Bureau of Labor Statistics and others coming in saying, well, actually, we're not. But they can't break through. There's this perception that we're in a recession. And that drives a lot of behavior. Both for job seekers and for employers. So when you look at the data, again, and you have differences as well. You have economists that say, yes, we are. You have economists that say, no, we're not. And again, if you're a job seeker, it doesn't really matter what you call it. You can either find a job or you can't find a job, or you can find a job that matches your skills. And as Robin said, there are a lot of restaurants, there are a lot of types of jobs that are available, that there's help wanted signs and hiring and those things. But if you're a professional communicator and you don't want to wait tables, then that doesn't help you much. Right?
I think one of the things I've seen being a college professor, and talking to my students who have just graduated, I try to stay in touch with a lot of them. They're having a difficult time too. So it's at all levels, really. It's not just those of us that are highly experienced professionals. It's at all levels. The biggest complaint that I hear is they want all this experience, but it's an entry-level position. So I tried to show them my college experience. I have an internship. I did this, I did this.
Experience for an entry-level position that will probably pay you just $55,000. Yeah, sure.
Exactly. Yeah. So they're frustrated too. I belong to a group called Girls in Marketing, and I've been mentoring some of these young women just to kind of say like, hey, you will get a job. Trust me. Like, it might not be right away. In the meantime, get as much experience as you can. If you can start your own business and do your own thing, do it in the meantime.
And I'd like to point something out about Kristina's experience that I don't think you'll run into very often, which is, as an adjunct professor, not only is Kristina accustomed to sharing information, but she's also in a unique position to absorb it from the current generation. I mean, not long after I graduated, I was invited back to my alma mater to share my experiences in the real world of communication. And I was there as a guest speaker, and these kids are just, I mean, they're college students, but I'm old enough that I call them kids because I'm that old, but
I call them kidults.
They're sitting there, they're like, kidults, there you go.
Kidults.
But they're sitting there, they're sitting there absorbing all of this with this air of fascination, because to them, the experiences that I was sharing were so different than what they expected. But then the tables got turned. Then I started getting asked about how to do certain things on Facebook, or what a particular thing meant on Instagram. I can't remember it now because that was about a decade ago, but it was a good time. And it made me realize that I had some knowledge gaps. So just something I felt like I should point out about Kristina's experience is many employers pay dearly for continuing education to help their employees keep their skills up to date, which in turn benefits the employer. But one thing that Kristina brings, and one of the reasons that I find it so hard to believe that she's gone 6 months without a good offer, is she gets exposure from people that are out in the world every day, and it's something that no employer would have to pay for. I mean, Kristina, what do you have to say about that?
So yeah, I do, I really do learn as much from my students as I think they learn from me. And I've always sought out positions where I had the opportunity to mentor, younger professionals. So, I feel like I do have my finger on the pulse of that a little bit. And not only am I working with traditional students, but I'm working with non-traditional students as well. I'm working with students who went into the military and are now just going into college. Or I'm working with professional adults who are saying, I need to change careers because I can't find anything in my field. So I'm going to take this, I work in the School of Professional Studies. So I'm going to take this continuing ed certificate program, in the hopes that will help me land a job. And then when they leave the program, I get emails saying, I'm frustrated. I still haven't found anything. I've got 10, 15 years of experience in this industry, but they can't seem to see how those skills are transferable into this industry.
We often talk about how we develop resumes based on the function of what you do and not necessarily the industry in which you do it. So, for instance, we work with a lot of high-level sales executives or key account managers or global account managers, national account managers, or whatever. So it's really about the process, right? So whether or not you're selling tech, and working with, very high level decision makers within the IT infrastructure, or you're selling, fuselages, or you're selling whatever. Ultimately, the function of sales is universal. It's about building that relationship. It's about being able to explain how the solution is a good fit for the organization. It's about gaining trust. It's about working with a group of people, whether or not that's pre-sales engineers, the decision makers within the organization, and coming sort of full circle to see how it is that you can work together to create some solution for a business problem that you have. So the product itself almost doesn't matter. It's about the numbers. It's about the results. It's about the ability to quickly identify how it, or if possible, the product that you're selling can be, beneficial to that organization, and then going and closing that deal. So when we're creating resumes at a very high level for, people that are selling in the enterprise space, we don't even talk much about the product itself. We talk about the process, and we talk about the results and the relationships and the impact that they've been able to make. That's what I think resonates. If companies would just look at, or stop trying to make it, square peg and square peg, round hole and round hole kind of approach, and open up the requirements for what they're looking for in this person, I think that a job search would be a heck of a lot easier. But everybody, like you said, Kristina, is trying to find that, unicorn. Those people don't exist. Or, I posted something on LinkedIn this week about, the quiet quitting phenomenon, and how, everybody talks about wanting a rock star. Well, guess what? 99% of us are not rock stars, right? 99% of us are just normal people that want to go to work, do a job, do well, go home and live our lives, right? So when companies are creating these requirements lists, to me, it seems like there's such a massive disconnect between what that organization truly needs in that candidate, and the person who is making up this sort of wish list for everything they want in a person. And that's why hiring is, always constantly up against a brick wall. It needs to be, I believe, a much more collaborative process, and the people that those candidates are going to work for need to be much more actively involved in defining the requirements for what that role really needs. Because we'd all love to run around and say, hey, I need somebody with an MBA, right, to answer the phone. But that's just not the case. You just don't need that, right?
Even if you got that, you wouldn't keep them, because how many people that that have MBAs would stay in a phone answering job for very long?
None of them, right? So that's that's sort of the moral of the story, right? Making sure that the requirements are truly realistic and being crafted by the people that are going to actually, manage the function of that candidate, as opposed to someone sitting in a room with a notepad and making up lists, which is, in my mind, that's what I see happening in
It is a huge
America.
problem because, like you mentioned earlier, Robin, post the pandemic, while the pandemic shouldn't be a reason why things should evolve, but just looking at the talent out there, I think more often than not, organizations do look for that 100% fit. They do look for that unicorn. They're willing to wait it out rather than putting merit into transferable skills, understanding that certain things can be taught, while certain skills related to leadership, etc., they are inherent to an individual. And that's what gets the job done, not your hard technical skills. Once you get to a certain level, it's about how you do the job and less about what you do.
Well, I want to combine what Robin and Janice just said. Well, first, let me say that seeing some of these job descriptions, I envision less someone sitting there writing a list and more someone throwing darts at a dartboard. And it's like, okay, that's what we'll add next. I imagine that NBC programs the fall schedule in the same way, but exactly as Janice described, it's more about the soft skills that you learn, not so much that you know everything, but that you know how to figure things out.
Yes.
And on top of that, Robin, what the description that you gave of trying to sell a pen, for instance, is less about what the pen is and more about what the pen does. I think that's also a good allegory for how people should be presenting themselves on their resumes. I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but I just wanted to share the one thing that I can contribute to this conversation while I could.
Love it.
So before we get to the resume piece, I do want to pick everyone's brains about when you see a job description, as Kristina said, there are red flags that you can spot that will let you know that a job may not be sunshine and roses. And one that I hear people beat up on a lot is family atmosphere. When I see translations of job requirement buzzwords, that one inevitably gets translated into, well, what that means is they're going to call me at 10 o'clock at night and expect me to pick up my phone or answer my email, and there won't be boundaries. So with that said, I mean, what are some of the red flags that y'all would recommend people watch for?
Yeah, if your company is trying to call themselves your family, that's a huge red flag, because a company is not a family. It's definitely not.
I agree. I do. If you follow my posts on LinkedIn, sometimes I do funny vocabulary lessons. And that was one of them.
Those are great.
Family. Yes. Where, if somebody says, hey, come, we're like a family, run the other direction, right? Because that's exactly right, Brendan. It means no boundaries. It's like, if someone could yell at you over lunch, and then, also call you at 10 o'clock at night and ask you for a project status for an update. Because we're family, it's okay. It's not.
So in the case of yelling, it would be, when we say family, that would connote in-laws rather than immediate family.
It could be.
Sorry.
We're Italian. We yell about everything, and then 2 minutes later, it's all forgotten, and we move on. So
you said it. I didn't. What else? What else, gang?
Back to the point of the job description that you made, Brandon, and you talked about all these requirements, and we see that very often, right? You want all these things in a job description, but I also want to point out companies do not update their job descriptions routinely. Let me tell you that sometimes you will see JDs that have been sitting there from 10, 15 years ago, and it's the same information that gets regurgitated over and over. That is not even relevant to the current times. Nobody's got that time to constantly go back and revise the job description. That is also a problem, but I think, yeah, for me, that's a huge factor too.
Absolutely.
I also think that it's a red flag if organizations have a very specific note or requirement about being able to come in and hit the ground running. For me, that means we're going to offer you no support. There's probably not going to be any learning and development, and the training is going to be non-existent. That's always a little bit of a red flag for me. I think everyone needs a really good, healthy orientation and support system and process in place when they start a new job, even in a leadership role, even someone just to educate you about the processes within the organization. But when I see, you need to hit the ground running, or someone who's ready to come in and sort of take over, that to me is a little bit of a red flag. It probably means that job has been vacated over and over and over, and they desperately need someone just to come in and kind of pick up where you left off. But there's a reason why people consistently or continuously leave one job over and over and over. And that's a question that I always recommend that our candidates ask in an interview, the person before in this position. How long were they here, or how many people have been in this role in the past 5 years? If you hear, 5, 6, 7 people have been in that job in the past 10 years, you probably don't want that job.
Yeah. And I know I've been in situations before where the onboarding process has been non-existent. And that was, kind of how it was in my last position, where I came on board. What should have taken 1 or 2 days took almost 4 weeks. So now, I'm sitting around and I want to work. But, really, I'm just acting as kind of a glorified secretary until, okay, now we have time to onboard you. Okay, well, great. Now let me get up to speed.
We had a marketing executive client not long ago, this was last year, took a position with an organization that was not ready for her. And they set up a chair and a little table next to the receptionist at their... That's where she was working. And after 2 weeks of this, with no one setting up her systems, finding her an office, she ended up quitting the job. Now, it was a fairly lengthy process. It was a 6-figure position. But, these are the kinds of things that we see and hear. So the perception of what a company might be and what they actually are sometimes two wildly, wildly different things.
Yeah.
And I want to respond to that real fast. So Robin just touched on one of the perhaps biggest factors that will influence longevity and retention, which I know are business buzzwords this day and age. Bad onboarding equals bad retention. There's no easy way to say that or sugarcoat it. And the reason is the onboarding process, for anyone who's out there listening, the onboarding process is essentially the first impression and first taste that your new hire gets of your company from the inside. And a bad onboarding process is not something that you can recover from. Because if an employee walks away and says, yo, I feel like I had the best experience onboarding. I had so much support. I wanted for nothing. They answered every question. They are going to try to feed that forward. And they're going to do the best they can to support their coworkers. And that kind of feeds into itself and creates a better work environment. Conversely, someone who gets a terrible onboarding, who maybe goes for weeks asking questions of HR about benefits and gets zip in return, that is going to stay with them as well. And it's going to make them go, if that's how they're treating the new hire, what's going to happen when I've been here for a while? Is the employee experience all it's cracked up to be? And they're more than likely going to start looking almost immediately. I've seen that before.
Oh yeah. I will say the only thing that kept me there was I had fantastic coworkers, right? And I just started asking questions. I said, where's this on the server? How do I do this? What is the policy for this? And, luckily I had fantastic coworkers who were very willing to help me out. So by the time they got around to actually onboarding me, I already knew everything because I had asked.
I mean, an onboarding process really should start from day one, right? And whoever is doing that onboarding needs to be a cheerleader for your organization, because you are 100%
Mhm.
right. It sets the tone, it sets the stage for how people are going to feel about moving into that organization. So it's all about positivity. And I think that, since the pandemic, people have definitely changed in terms of what they view as a good company culture, right? I always say that, we don't really care so much about ping pong tables in the break room anymore, right? Give us flexibility. If you're, a
Mhm.
parent, make it so that, they can leave comfortably in the middle of the day to attend a function at their kid's school, right? Those couple of
Mhm.
hours that you let somebody come and go, or, manage their own schedule, work from home or create a hybrid, that kind of stuff really is the foundation of culture. It's not,
Mhm.
fancy coffee in the break
Yes.
room, right? It's really about how people feel about working for you and how they feel about themselves, and their commitment to your organization, whether or not that's reciprocal. If you've got somebody who you're expecting to punch a clock from 8 to 5 and there's never any bend or there's never any opportunity and you're missing everything, you're not going to stay at that job very long. So culture to me has definitely seen a seismic shift since the pandemic. Don't even get me started on the whole work from home thing, because that is going to be hugely impactful into how companies operate. They said last year they were interviewing and did surveys of company executives and were asking by the time this year, how many people or how much of their workforce do they expect to be back in the office? And last year when they were surveying those executives were saying around 50%. Now they're hoping for 20%. People do not want to go back to an office. We're seeing it hands down. Kristina, you've talked about it. My entire team works virtually. A lot of people have hybrid situations, but this hard push, where people are taking a hard line stance that you have to show up in the office, it's not ending well for a lot of organizations.
Well, and a common thing that I've seen on LinkedIn is whenever a company announces a return to office policy, I've seen a response from some recruiter that says, "Wow, thanks for making recruitment at my company so easy. We offer fully remote or hybrid work." And to add a little bit of context to what Robin just said, previously I shared with you that a disproportionate amount of executives wanted their workforce to return to the office relative to the workforce themselves. And this is what the breakdown was. Of executives, about 75% wanted their workforces back in the office full time. Compare that with the percentage of the workforce themselves that wanted same, and the number dropped to about 34%. So there is a wild disconnect between leadership and employees, and we're seeing it exactly as Robin said. The latest one to find that out the hard way is Apple. I didn't read the exact details of their policy, but they put out a policy, and the next day, LinkedIn was full of headlines about employees push back against Apple's return to office push. And I'm like, this can't come as a surprise to them. But think about it. And I've made this point before as well, but think about something. How many headlines have we seen on LinkedIn, in mainstream media, on social media, to the effect that since the implementation of work from home, productivity has increased, morale has increased, people are happier, people like what they do, all the things that companies claim that they want, keyword claim, they are reaping the benefits. But some of these same companies are still pushing hard for RTO. What does that tell you? It was never about productivity, morale, any of that. I've worked for many a company that claimed they cared about all of those things, but I'm looking back and watching what those same companies are doing now. They are the ones that are pushing hardest to get people back in the office. That tells me it was never about employee happiness or productivity. It's more about control. Your thoughts?
So just tying together a bunch of the things we've just talked about, right? Whether it's, as Janice said, position descriptions, job descriptions that are out of date, right? Or as we just talked about, the onboarding process, or even the ability to work from home. We spent so much time focused on the job search process, and we don't talk enough about the job accomplishment process. So once you've got the job, right, are you willing to put up with not having a current job description? Are you willing to put up with not having an onboarding process? Are you willing to work for a place that's not going to allow for working from home or remotely, right? And a lot of times, again, in this competitive market, you're spending months, you're spending all this time trying to land the job without thinking through, what if I get this job and it's not what I want it to be? Are you willing to walk away and go through the process again? So I think you need to put as much time into preparing yourself for, what am I willing to accept when I get a job? And all the things we just talked about, is that going to be acceptable? Is there a workaround, as Kristina said? Can I find coworkers? So even if the onboarding process isn't what it should be, can I make it work because other people will help me? Is not having a updated position description not great, but it's not a showstopper. That's acceptable. So where is that line so that, you spend all this time and energy trying to get a job? Do you stay in that job, or are you just grateful to have the job?
Mm-hmm. And I will say, being in marketing, that a lot of times, when you go into a job, you expect a little bit of chaos, because that's just marketing in general. But, enough that it's tolerable. And I've always been kind of a process nerd. So I always like to go in and right away look at what's inefficient and start with the process, and then try to, knock the chaos down, basically. So that's kind of how my whole career has been. I don't think it's been designed that way. I just end up in organizations where I go in and I go, oh my God, this is a mess. How can we fix this?
Kristina, I gotta say, that is a phenomenal skill set. If you can come in and do that bit of process analysis and take that analytic perspective, to any company out there who's listening, who wouldn't want to hire someone with, what did you say, Kristina? Your career is 15 years long and counting. Who wouldn't want someone with 15 years experience with process improvement?
Seriously. That kind of turnaround expertise. That's so critical.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Thank
Absolutely.
you.
So
I just want to pick up on something that Kristina said earlier. Actually, two things. I'm going to keep trying to tie things together. One thing that Kristina said before we started the podcast about her presentation, right? Her audio, her video, all that stuff. And in this current environment, I don't know how many interviews that I've either done myself or facilitated or been on, the hiring end where I put somebody on camera, right? And did the interview remotely. And so for a job seeker, knowing that you have the technology to be able to do a remote interview, how do you look? How do you sound? I mean, you can get knocked out of the competition very early if you're not prepared to be able to professionally present yourself in this way. It's a new environment now.
That definitely comes from my media background and my media training, and also PR, over the years. So it's important to me. It's really important to me, what image am I portraying?
Yeah.
David, we have a little bit of experience with PR, don't we?
Yeah, we do.
What was your second point? I'm sorry.
The second point goes back to Kristina talked about mentoring, right, with her students and others. And it goes to this idea of networking, right? Forever we've been talking about the value of networking. You have to network. And a lot of people think, I've got to go to parties. I got to hand out, my, business cards, that stuff. That's not networking the way that it needs to be effective today. And it gets to one of the biggest, most pleasant surprises for me when I left the military and transitioned into the civilian world was the number of people that took meetings with me that didn't know me from Adam. But they met me because somebody that I knew recommended that they have coffee with me or that they get together with me. And the second piece of that was not only did those people make the time to meet with me based on somebody else's recommendation, they honestly asked, what can I do to help you? Can I look at your resume? Can I give you advice? Can I tell you about this business? Can I connect you with other people? So I think that we often overlook the value of our personal connection. Is LinkedIn important? Absolutely. As Robin said, though, you need to do it the right way. You don't expect people to do job search for you. You don't ask for these types of things. But too often we don't rely enough on our personal connections and our professional connections in a way to use that to network, right? And so the number of meetings that I had over coffee with people, again, based on somebody else's recommendation. And the only reason they met with me because they knew Brandon, and Brandon said, Dave's a great guy, you should meet with him. And not only did they meet with me, but they said, what can I do to help? And they meant it.
That's how it's done. I mean, that is networking 101 right there.
I think in your set of connections, you almost need to have 2 or 3 super connectors, and these super connectors can branch you out into connecting you with a range of people, right? So I think it's important to understand that in your network, who are these active super connectors that can take you and help you bridge those connections across a plethora of people.
100%.
Janice, I want to go back to something that you brought up a little while ago, and I want us to expand on it a little bit. So when you described an important aspect of a new hire that you look for being not so much that you know everything, that you know how to say a complete cohesive sentence, that's important, but not so much that you know everything, but that you know how to learn. And I want to share an anecdote from my history. A couple of years ago, and you may have heard this anecdote from a previous episode, but a couple of years ago, I hired someone for a graphic artist role, and they won out, not necessarily because they had all the technical skills that they were going to need, but because in the interview, they convinced me, 1, that they were versatile, and 2, that they wouldn't back down from a challenge. And after they started, I spent a lot of time mentoring them and teaching them not just here's the 1, 2, 3 of your day job, but here's the overarching direction that we're going in, and here's some things coming down the pipe that I'm going to need you to help with. And from then on, we stood up a brand new capability. I was the strategist, and to a large degree, I was also executioner. That didn't come out right, but you know what I mean. But I was the strategist and the doer, and I was delegating certain things to this other graphic artist. And here's the thing. It would have been very easy for this person to just do exactly what I told them to do. In other words, if I said, I need you to do this, this, and this, I need a graphic of a coffee cup, say. That particular requirement never came up, but it's an example because, as we all know, I love coffee. And with that said, fancy coffee in the break room, it may not be the be-all, end-all, but it doesn't hurt. Anyway, it would have been very easy for them to just say, yes, sir, I'll make that coffee cup for you, and just leave it at that. What this particular person did was they would actually reinterpret what I told them. They would hear my immediate request, but then in the back of their mind, they would say, okay, here's the problem that he's actually trying to solve. Maybe I can come up with a better solution. And a lot of times, this person would come back to me, not with what I asked for, but with what I needed. And I shared this as an anecdote on LinkedIn not that long ago about how I am a terrible boss because I did that, because I let them have the latitude to redefine the problem as they saw fit. But people like that come in and display that kind of competence are worth their weight in gold. So, but I just wanted to compare notes with you on that.
Those are the real unicorns
Yes.
that we should be after. Yes.
It's a joke in
Absolutely.
marketing that the client doesn't ever really know what they want. So
It's true.
we give them what, right? They tell us what they think they want, but yeah.
I wanted to touch base on one thing that Dave said that I thought was so true. and to sort of take it a step further, I always recommend to our clients that they define expectations when they're embarking on a job search. It's okay to ask a couple of questions at the outset before you agree to jump into an interview process. A lot of times, Kristina, job seekers feel that they're at such a disadvantage, right? And that they, right from the outset, kind of lose control over these very lengthy and convoluted interview processes. So have 3 or 4 things that are important to you. Number one, what's salary range for this position? If someone is not willing to divulge what this pays, to me, that's a red flag. The second thing is to always ask, what is the arrangement for the work environment? Is it a work from home? Is it an office? Is it a hybrid? And do you anticipate that changing anytime soon? That's really important because you could, take a work from home job and 2 months later, they want you to move to another state. Yeah. And then, the other things, how long does the process take? What is the, time frame for when you're going to make an offer? If they say, we're going to be looking at candidates over 3 or 4 months, great. But if you don't have 3 or 4 months, or you don't want to commit 3 or 4 months to this particular job, it's so much better to know that upfront and not at the point when you're 7 interviews in and they're still scheduling you for 5 more, right? So it's okay to own your own time and own your own job search and know what you're worth and what the value is that you bring to an organization, and then make a determination whether or not you want to participate in that process or not. So I think a lot of people don't necessarily feel empowered to do that, but we all should. I always say it's your time, it's your dime, right? It's an expensive prospect. Sometimes you're traveling for interviews, you're preparing, you're spending a lot of time where you could be, looking for another position, or like you doing some consulting. Do you really want to work for somebody for free who's not going to hire for this position for 6 months and maybe not at all? And shouldn't that be an option for you to say yay or nay at the outset of the process?
And Robin just made a point that's a good idea for more than one reason. Robin, you asked about the work arrangement. That is a wise move regardless of what the job rec says. And I say that because one of the headlines that I've seen over the last 2 months is a company will advertise a job as remote, and people will simply take that for granted. But then after they sign the offer letter, they'll hear, oh yeah, so we'll need you in the office in 2 days or whatever your start date is. And the job seeker will go, huh? The word remote was in the job description. And the hiring manager or the recruiter will say, oh, but it's not actually a remote job. We just put that in there so we'd get people to apply. So you've got to watch for that. So David, 100%. You were about to say something. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, sorry. The, great points for Robin on having questions, right? And being willing to ask questions. Backing up just a little bit for that in your preparation, do the research on the organization that you want to work for. For me, the number one disqualifier during the interview process was people that you could tell didn't spend the time and didn't get to know anything about the organization that they are now applying to, right? For me, that's a cardinal sin. If you can't even take the time to figure out and have done the research about the organization, and then you come into an interview and it's clear that you haven't done that, then you're off the list for me.
Something I would also recommend is probably listening to their earnings calls from the last couple of quarters, just if you're somebody who's concerned about stability, because the market is really volatile and you need to understand whether certain positions have a longevity in the organization. Just see if the organization is growing. Listen to the last couple of earnings calls to see how the growth is trending.
Absolutely. So I think we've covered the ground of current market conditions and recommended do's and don'ts for job seekers. But any final comments on that before we move on? Next up, the resume.
I can't wait.
Going
no,
once?
God.
You can't wait. It figures that the executive resume writer would be looking forward to the segment on resumes. That makes a certain amount of sense to me. I like it when things make sense.
You know I'm not really a resume writer, right? I do not write resumes. No one wants me writing their resumes. I promise you. Like 22 years ago, I wrote a resume. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, I mean, I've got, like you want to surround yourself with people that are very good at what they do, much smarter than you. And that's our team. So, but I do know a resume inside now, sure.
There you go. Anything else on market conditions and job seeker behaviors before we move on? Going once, going twice. All right. So one critical component, other than the cover letter to the job seeking process, is the resume. I've heard opinions from multiple people that say cover letters are a dying art, so we won't even go there tonight. But Kristina, I think you have a resume. Is that right?
I do, yes.
I would expect a marketing professional to have at least some sort of promotional documentation.
I do.
So I'm comforted that my world can actually make enough sense that, people have resumes. So let's have a look at your resume and just see what folks have to say. So I looked at this a couple of times before tonight, and hopefully our co-panelists have had a chance to look at it a little bit. But I look at this, and I've said it before, Kristina, you have experience that is enviable and prodigious, and a lot of other adjectives that I could probably say better if I'd had coffee that wasn't decaf. But
thank you.
It's a good-looking resume. So why don't you give us a quick primer on, I know you did at the top of the episode, but give us a quick primer once again on what you do and what your strongest skill sets are, and maybe give us an indicator of what your next role would look like, or what your desired next role would look like.
So the first two things you're seeing here are really the same. I just changed the name in 2022 when I left my current position. Marketing consultant, content marketing specialist. As I said, I've been writing content since about 2015. I know on there it says 2016, but I actually started, doing it as a side hustle, and had quite a bit of work starting in 2016. From there, I've held a couple consulting positions, and, I've worked with agencies. I've worked with educational institutions as a marketing consultant. And then I've also worked with private clients. So the first two things you're seeing are pretty much my freelance, contracted experience. Do you want to scroll down?
And walk us back through. Yeah. We have all the modern conveniences, including documents that scroll. Say again?
So, and then of course the next thing I have there is my adjunct faculty with Albright College. Now I have been an adjunct at other universities, but I did not list them on here because when I started teaching as an adjunct, my undergrad is in speech communication and public relations. So when I started teaching public speaking. And that's kind of how I got into the adjunct position. And of course, I have a master's of education, curriculum and instruction in English. So I also have taught English composition. Then, when Albright came calling, they needed somebody to teach marketing courses. And because it was a school of professional studies, they wanted adjunct professors who are actually out working in the field. I have nothing against PhDs whatsoever. I've worked with a lot of them, and they're all lovely people. But if somebody has a PhD and they haven't actually been out in the field working, especially currently with digital marketing, as quickly as things change, they're getting students are getting a lot of theory, which is great for an intro to marketing class, right? But if you're teaching something like integrated content strategies, you better make sure that course is up to date. Because your students will call you out on it. There's been times when I've told them that there was, a change in the Google algorithm, or something had happened with Facebook. And, by the time I gave them that information, everything had changed. So, and I always kind of give them that caveat too. Things move very quickly in digital marketing. So what I'm telling you right now might not be the case next week. So that's kind of, where I was at.
And to quote Leonard McCoy from Star Trek: The Motion Picture, I know engineers, they love to change things. And there's not always a definitive strategy behind what changes they make.
Yeah. So I've listed my professional memberships. I think if you scroll back up, there's some other experiences on there with advertising agencies that I've worked with. And, as a brand manager, strategic account director. And prior to that, I had worked in education. So I was with a career and technology center for, oh my goodness, quite a while, 7 or 8 years. And held multiple roles. It was actually the first job that I had after coming back into the workforce after not fully raising my children, but when they were old enough to go to school. So, I did have a career gap prior to that, but it's going back so far now. My oldest is 21. So, I didn't feel the need to put all of that on there.
Kristina, describe to us what your optimal next role would look like.
Director level marketing or communications. Ideally, my sweet spot tends to be in education and with nonprofits. I'm not so much of a corporate gal, but I do really, and I enjoy working in those environments because I really truly feel like I'm making a difference. Education has always been something that I have been able to market and market well because I believe in it and I'm very passionate about it.
David, it's a good thing she doesn't want to get into the PR field or we'd have some pretty serious competition.
I dabbled in the PR field and, I leaned more towards the marketing side. Yeah.
All right. So Robin, you were about to go to town on this. So take it away. And you've heard now what Kristina's objective is. So maybe offer some insights on whether her resume is suitable for her objective or not, and maybe how she could do better.
I actually, Kristina, while you were chatting here, I just sent you a couple of examples of marketing executive resumes.
Oh, great.
So you can just get an idea of, how we kind of presented here. So the first thing that I'm seeing in your resume is it's too long. 4 pages, for a resume, it's too lengthy. I think that, we write resumes that are 2 pages. We work with people with, lots of years of experience. It's really about a snippet, right? A snapshot. So you talk about sort of being creative, a creative marketing person, but there's not really any sort of creative elements on your resume other than, just from a visual perspective, some of the color. So I think that, when you say that you are creative, I want to see creative, right? So I would say unleash your inner creativity here. Talking about yourself is extremely difficult. That's why people often struggle with their resumes. But you're a content creator, right? You influence people to be interested in things, to buy things, to read things, to be be attracted to things. Do the same for yourself. So when you are writing your resume, think to yourself, what is it about me that I would want to know? Or if I were hiring for this position, what are the most important things that I would want to know? And then wow someone. You have, I believe, a great story to tell. I know that you've got a couple of choppy different experiences. You mentioned a couple of times that you had a previous experience that wasn't great. And that's okay to remove that from your resume. Any job that you weren't in for a year or more, you can probably take that out of your resume.
Okay.
At the grown-up level, which you are, you only really need years on resumes. You don't need months. I would combine your no fear marketing and your Kristina Martin media under one header, because what's happening, Kristina, when your resume is getting submitted, you're going through applicant tracking, here's what it's picking up. 2022 to present, 2016 to present, then you're jumping to 17 to present, then 20 to 21 again, 18 to 18. That is making the ATS crazy. It looks like you've got too many things going on at once.
And let me add, since you referenced the ATS, let me add a tidbit of wisdom that we picked up from our last episode of Higher Learning, which is, I'm trying to remember exactly how Scott said it. I think he said, you can't beat the system. Scott Singer, a peer of yours in the resume writing industry, made the comment in response to my direct question, how in the world do we beat those ATSs that nobody likes? And he said, you can't. And his recommendation, and see what you think of this, Robin, was avoid keyword stuffing your resume to get past the ATS, because it may get past an automatic screen, but the second a human being sees it, they're going to discard it for the same reason that the ATS might have. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. We don't really stuff keywords into resumes, not in that way. They come about in a much more genuine and organic way, but that's never really a good idea. But ATS a lot of times picks up on dates. That's the first thing. Most people think that it's all about, all of this content, right? You're talking about what you did there and your job description and all that stuff. Sometimes the basics are this. They're looking for years of experience. They're looking for longevity, or they're looking for, sort of a natural progression in your career. They're also looking for job titles. That's the biggest sort of initial review that either an ATS or a human being is going to do on your resume. Okay. So when I see someone like you, that has a lot going on sort of all at one time, it's always my recommendation that you combine some things. So your No Fear Marketing and your Kristina Martin Media should all be under one header from 2016 to present. That just took care of one big problem, right? Your most recent position or a big chunk of your experience has been from 2016 to now.
Got it.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Janice, let me ask you about this. So you see her resume, and to me, this looks like a resume that would come into someone operating at your level. So here's the question, and David, feel free to chime in on this as well. But one thing that I've heard mixed opinions about from hiring managers over the years is, can diversity of experience be a bad thing? In other words, can someone appear to be unfocused or lacking expertise in any one field because they've tried so many different things? Your reaction?
For me, it is mixed. If you're hiring at a C-suite level, you'd like to see some consistency and growth in the same space over a period of time, because it demonstrates that you've been able to grow yourself in that career, in that space, by taking on a lot of responsibility. Now, it also depends whether you're switching industries around. That's a different story, or whether you're moving positions within the same space. If you're moving positions within the same space, for me, it definitely shows your versatility, your capability to adapt, your desire to learn something new. It really speaks a lot to your intellectual curiosity that you're comfortable with change and you're able to take on a lot of things, right? But for on the flip side, if you're constantly changing industries and you started with, say, in the restaurant, and then you're jumping to medicine, and then you're moving to IT, for me, that's a person who's just, he or she is not comfortable with what they're doing, and they need to constantly move. I mean, I would like to definitely attest to some of the comments Robin made in reviewing Kristina's CV. It comes across as a pharmaceutical CV, very black and white. very bland. This is the CVs I'm used to seeing in my space.
I do have a snazzier version, but I was told that they don't, like, the ATS can't read them.
Well, you should have two versions. So you should have your pretty resume. Well, I call it the pretty resume, the creative with we do like call out boxes. We might do a chart or a graph or some sort of visual. We always include quotes on resumes. So when, we engage with a new customer, we have them gather up, recommendations that they receive, snippets from their performance reviews. And then we sort of put those strategically through their resume, because a lot of times that very genuine commentary on that person is the thing that gets them through the door, right? So you're going to have that really pretty resume with the color and the cool layout or whatever, the things that say to me, I'm creative. And then you're going to have what I call the ugly resume, which is the ATS version of that resume.
Yes.
Yeah, it's that text only. It's that parsable file. So half the time in a battle, in a job search, it's knowing which file to use, right? I mean, it really comes down to basics. You're going to have a PDF, a Word document. You're going to have that scannable or that parsable or that ATS friendly resume. All of those things should be in your arsenal.
Kristina, chatting with you the last, so almost 45 minutes now, you come across as someone who's got so much to offer up in terms of your experiences, in what you've done, in terms of your skill set. I don't think this resume does justice to your candidacy that you're putting forward.
I would agree with you 100% there.
And as just from the lens of a hiring manager, I would put emphasis on the first 2 pages. And for me, those are the 2 pages that really need to stand out and speak to me as to who you are as a candidate. I would probably spend 1 or 2 minutes, right? All the words, etc. That wouldn't do it for me, but how you present yourself, how your energy comes across, how your personality, the work that you've done. That's what I would look for if I was hiring at a higher level.
David, your thoughts?
All right. So absolutely endorse what Robin and Janice have both said. The only other thing that I would add, and it gets to what Robin said about creativity, right? You want to be in a creative profession. You have creative experience. You want a resume that reflects that, right? You want to see that creativity. The other piece is that you're in a communication role. Even if it's not PR, it's communication. And so one of the biggest challenges to being a communicator is, can you communicate concisely, efficiently, right? The hardest thing is to edit yourself down, right? And not use so many words. So the easiest way to make the resume shorter is make it more concise, be impactful, but show that you have discipline to be able to hit the points and move on and not spend so much time. Again, anybody that's had 15, 20 years of experience, that's the toughest part, is how do I boil it down to 2 pages? But you have to. And being able to do that is a skill set.
I've been told that I'm very verbose, so I'm great at paring down content for other people. Just
do you want to be a
resume
resume writer? No, we're hiring.
Kristina, remember this rule of thumb. Sesquipedalian loquaciousness is not your friend.
There we go.
Really, when you're doing, at this level of the game, with the years of experience that you have, you could accomplish 90% of what you have content-wise in this resume in a short section that, talks about like competencies, right? Or, key competencies. Like I love the romance copy or, editorial work or website content, branding, marketing. And then under each of you could do that all in a section, just sort of list out those skills, right? 10 or 12 of them. That tells me at a glance who you are, what you know, what you do. And then I would really use the bulk of the, what I call really, valuable real estate, which is the 2 pages that you have for your resume, to tell a story or 2. So no fear marketing. So you talk about like Together Agency or Belong Home. I would pick an example of an experience that you had and then see it all the way through. What was their business problem? How did you come in and save the day like Superwoman, right? What were some of the results of the work that you did there? Because ultimately it's the results that resonate more with people than the description of what you did. So that's my 2 cents. And then I think that teaching is incredibly valuable. I love the adjunct faculty experience that you have, but I would put that at the bottom of the 2nd page. I would do a whole section on every university that you've ever taught at, and any of the courses that you taught. Okay. And then with adjunct faculty, what we love to do, how you get those student surveys at the end of the year where they, the university sends out them. Okay, so like all of the really cool things that make you tear up when you read them. I would grab a snippet of 1 or 2 of those, and I would put it right there, a quote about, because the ability in marketing to be impactful, whether or not it's through content that you created or someone that you taught or a student that you influenced, that to me says success, right? And then with the account executive and the content digital marketing specialist, and I promise this is the last thing I'm going to say about your resume, I would talk dollars, right? And Janice can probably attest to this. It sounds like she hires people in pharmaceuticals or maybe in sales roles, maybe in research and development or whatever the case may be. But I would include any kind of revenue, growth, account acquisitions, because anytime you're in any kind of account executive or account management role, how many people you engage, new customers that you brought on, a problem that you help solve. Because again, we're going back to working closely with the creative department to provide creative briefs. Well, that's all well and good, but give me a specific example. People relate to things that they relate to, right? So who was a customer? What was their problem? What did you do? What was the result? That's going to take care of a whole lot.
So you talked about having a process-oriented mindset. So obviously, if you've done any kind of process efficiency improvements, and if it has saved certain dollars for the organization, or if it has generated revenue, companies like to see that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'd like to make a recommendation, if I may. I feel kind of weird making a resume recommendation on a panel that includes Robin's story, but if I may, I'm waiting for permission to speak.
Go ahead.
Of course.
The point that Robin made about your message and your medium kind of blending, if you want to incorporate your creativity into the document itself, one thing that I like to do with my resume is I like to try to, I don't want to say subvert expectations because that phrase has a bad connotation, but I do like to try to do small things to make myself stand out. And one of my favorite things is, so they all want to see samples of your work, right? They all want to see what you've done for themselves rather than a verbal description. And a lot of times that manifests by asking for a portfolio. So everyone, let me say that a third time, everyone has seen resumes that have hyperlinks that go here, there, everywhere. I include that, but I also include QR codes that link to some of that. I've got one on my resume right now that goes straight to my LinkedIn. For certain jobs that I've applied for in the past, there was one that went to my YouTube channel. For another job that I applied to way back when, there was one that went straight to the playlist for all of the content that I've produced for B Squared. So it's something that if someone's looking at your resume on a computer, they can click the hyperlink. But if they're looking at a print copy, then it's nothing to whip out their cell phone and scan that code and see where it goes. I mean, I think it's safe to say we all have cell phones, right?
Yes.
Of course.
No?
Yes.
Okay. I was going to say, it's if we don't all have cell phones, then I have badly misread the market. But that, but you know, if someone does have a print copy of your resume, it's almost an act of convenience. Because it means they don't have to go find a computer. They can just scan that QR code with their phone and it'll pop right up.
Yeah.
So that's my wild and crazy idea. Robin, Janice, David, what do you guys think?
Yeah, I love that. And I also think that, using those links because you can include media links on your LinkedIn profile. I don't want to read a resume or click links on a resume. I think most people sort of feel the same. So absolutely. Or if you have a website, marketers often have a website where they post it. So I would just do that, like right at the top of your resume. I would click here to see my portfolio or whatever.
Yeah, I have a portfolio, and then typically I'll get asked for more examples. So then I will share a Google Drive folder with the employer so they can kind of see the process, I guess, especially with writing.
So 2 additional points from me. One is in the effort to condense down the whole technical skill piece. I think you can get rid of. Again, if you work in this business for 15 years, I assume you can do Microsoft Office and you can do Excel and you can do all those things. And if I need to ask you about it, I will. But you lose a lot of valuable real estate, listing all those things that are given. The only exception I would make to that is if you have special language skills, right? That someone wouldn't necessarily know. So if you're bilingual, those types of things. But routine, technical abilities in the tools of marketing and communications go without saying.
Yeah. Now about a couple months ago, I had a section in between creative marketing professional experience, in between my summary and professional experience that was career highlights, right? And a recruiter told me, get rid of that. So I took her advice, got rid of that. She said it kind of read like a laundry list. So of a laundry list of skills and things that she would assume that I would know how to do. But there were some really good things in there. So I said, well, where should I include some of these things? So you'll see like further down Linden Hall, you will see that there's a lot of results and a lot of career highlights listed under that particular job.
Good. Yeah. And she's right. I mean, people don't really like to read about accomplishments that are outside of the context of where they happened. So again, you've got really great experience. Do I think that your resume is dynamic? I don't. I think that it is, a standard resume. It's not going to generate a lot of interest because I don't see the creativity that I would expect from someone like you with your experience. So I would say, sort of unleash your inner marketer, and your, innovative, creative guru, and, redo this from top to bottom. I sent you some examples. I am happy to chat with you offline. But I think that you're holding back what your true talent is in your resume. And that's being a marketer and a communicator. You're following sort of outdated or antiquated rules for what you think a resume should be. And it can really be anything that makes somebody pick up the phone and call you.
Unless you want to be in the healthcare space. It looks serious enough.
Yeah. Well, and I will say, I think one of the reasons that it may seem like I'm holding back, is because, my last experience kind of shook my confidence. So I did dial it back, right? I dialed it back a little bit. So knowing that I have permission to go full throttle makes me feel good. Yeah.
Think about it.
And you're not alone in that. I mean, any kind of experience like that will shake you. But, I always say fake it till you make it, and just get back out there. You are so much more than one bad experience.
Something you want to think about is if your resume is reflective of who you are as a personality, and if you are this creative, energetic, strong person, and a company cannot respect that and doesn't want to take you in on the basis of that, you might want to question yourself. Is that the kind of culture you want to be a part of? And that's what I tell myself.
Right.
I tell myself
exactly.
that. I do have a colorful, CV for somebody in the healthcare space, and that is reflective of my energy and personality.
Yeah.
And Janice, I'll say this much. It's a bit of a tangent, but I love the stuff that you share on LinkedIn precisely because it is shared with a human voice. It's not copy that reads like it's gone through 100 levels of review. It's something that I don't really know how else to describe it, but it doesn't feel like it's been sanitized for marketing effect. I really like that when you post with a human voice, and I think that's absolutely great.
Thank you.
So,
which, if you know anything about the Google algorithm changes, they want more human sounding content.
Well, and that's the other thing too, to pick up on both Robin and Janice's points is, again, from a hiring perspective, once you get past the mechanical piece, right, you get past the system and you get to a human, they're looking at dozens, if not hundreds, of resumes. And putting it on pink paper isn't going to make you stand out. But having, again, creativity that breaks out from, here's another standard resume, here's another standard resume, right? So something that does show your personality, the culture you're looking for. But remember, the job of the resume is to get that phone call, right? You can't condense 15 years of experience into 2 pages. You've got to present in 2 pages the thing that will get the phone call that you can then explain when you're in an interview. All the things that you wanted to talk about, but you can't fit in 2 pages. So how do you make that resume impactful in a way that's not kitschy, that's not over the top? And again, I've seen those, right? Ink paper, fonts that are hard to read that they think is creative. Now it's just hard to read. Use the resume to let the person reading it understand something about who you are and want to call you and to learn more.
Right. Thank you.
Last question on this, and this is something that I've heard mixed opinions about from hiring managers through the years, and sometimes even I don't know how to take it. So the question is, if someone is a freelancer, should that be noted on the resume? And the reason I ask that is, on the one hand, it could be seen as someone being entrepreneurial and developing their skill sets away from a work environment. But at the same time, people might see that and wonder if their job will hold the candidate's full attention, if that makes sense. So it's kind of a 50-50 scenario. So, David and Janice, what do you guys think?
I say yes, because you need to tell the truth. I mean, that's what you did. You've got to account for that time. And as a freelancer, you, again, with 2 pages, you're not going to list 15 different clients over 2 years that you had separately. But being a freelancer explains that you had lots of different experiences with different clients doing different things. That's my view.
Mm-hmm.
I think you can definitely list it, and if there is any concern towards us, that can be clarified in the interview stage. I don't think it's a showstopper.
Robin?
Agreed. I like to list freelance experience sort of in a lump sum area. So if you freelance for, 6, 8, 10 years or whatever, give a quick synopsis of the type of freelancing work that you did. And then, name drop a couple of clients, a number of particular projects. Again, taking it across the finish line, impact, successes. People get into trouble when they sort of list out every freelance job that they had and they put dates. They did this for 3 months or whatever. That becomes a problem again with the ATS. And it also can be, pretty, involved to read. So doing a synopsis and a highlighted section of your freelance work absolutely should be included in your resume. It's a big part of who you are.
Mm-hmm.
Wise words. Very wise words. Well, we're almost out of time, but I think this has been a great discussion. And I will say I've learned a lot. And Kristina, I hope you've gotten some good insights out of this as well.
I did. I have 4 pages of notes.
Wow. Now I feel inadequate. I have 1 page. So
Verbose.
there you go. But then again, yeah. So to our experts, if you could give Kristina one piece of advice, maybe your most frequently asked question, job seeking, resumes, anything that you see on a recurring basis that you wish people would know before they cross paths with you, what would it be? Janice, why don't we start with you?
I always like a candidate who has a strong and a compelling story to tell. So that elevator pitch, your first 5 minutes are very defining for me as a hiring manager as to how you present yourself and what you put forward.
Robin, how about you?
Exactly what Janice said, but coming from the other side. It's the, from the resume perspective, telling a genuine, compelling story, being true and honest about who you are, what you've accomplished, how it is that you contribute is always going to be hands down something that people relate to more than a bulleted list of your job duties, right? So it is for us and always has been about that story.
Because let me tell you, most candidates present the same cookie cutter approach in an interview or even in a resume. So that's what will set you apart. A strong, compelling story and an elevator pitch. That is reflected both in your CV and in how you come across as a candidate.
Absolutely. David, last comment of the night is yours.
Oh, wow. So I will do a variation on that theme, and it gets back to something I said earlier about doing your research and being prepared, right? So you spend so much time and energy trying to get the interview, right? And trying to find the right job experience. Don't blow it once you get in the room, right? Do the research, know about the organization, have your elevator pitch, have questions already in mind, let your personality shine through. So again, don't waste all the time and energy you've spent on trying to get the job and then lose it, when you cross the threshold. So prepare, be ready, have questions, let your personality shine through. So all the work that you you do on LinkedIn and with your resume isn't for naught, because then you can't close the deal.
Wise
Thank you
words,
so
David.
much.
And hang with it, Kristina. 6 months, I know, is a long time, but hang with it and keep that patience and choose where you want to go next.
Thank you. That's so refreshing to hear. It really is.
It is. You don't want to have that pressure of time on you. And with the experiences that you've had, you absolutely want to be selective about the culture, the workplace, the leaders that you work with. That is very, very important. It will be telling of your longevity with an organization and your own growth.
Yeah. I agree.
Absolutely. Wise words, Janice, and wise words from everyone. And I know y'all are sick of hearing me say it, but I sincerely appreciate you taking the time to join us tonight. This has been phenomenal. So for more from our panel of experts, follow them on LinkedIn and send a connection request if you want to. I can tell you from experience, all 4 of these people are intelligent, creative people that are great to follow. They always have great stuff to share. So if you follow them, tell them B Squared sent you. But that's all for now. Until next time, this is Brandon Bridges reminding you the best way to be is B Squared. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye, everybody.
I'll share a thought here. You can't beat the system.